Hello, this is Leslie, and I am the host of the Why Not Today podcast. This is a podcast to celebrate people who have been courageous and said, why not today? I started this podcast in honor of my father, Patrick Kane, who often did say, why not today? I'm based in Reston, Virginia, planned community right outside of Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us today. And this is our anniversary issue. It's hard to believe it's been a year since I started this. We've had a recording episode every 2 weeks since. And so I thought, since it's our anniversary, how appropriate would it be to include one of my siblings? So I have my brother, my youngest brother, Chris, joining me today. So I'm excited to hear have him share courageous stories. Maybe we'll throw in some courageous stories of my dad. But I always talk about where we met and where we connected. And it's kind of easy with Chris because he's 5 years younger than me. But it's funny, I do remember, Chris, that the day that they brought you home from the hospital, they picked me up from Lank and you were there. I'm like, another one? You were number 4. So
Another one. And there's 2 more.
I know. I had to share my reign with everybody. But I'm excited to have you on and just have a conversation about courage. So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you live and what you do, and a fun fact about you that nobody might know. Hopefully, I know it. But
Well, I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So
okay.
I'm Leslie's brother. So that's who I am. Born and raised in Reston and then Sterling. So I didn't go very far until about 1.5 years ago. So I now live in Denver, Colorado. Been wanting to get out here for a long time, so we finally did it. What do? I am in technology sales. I've been in cybersecurity sales for the last 5 years, working for a company that's headquartered in California. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm your brother and you know a lot about me. So
What's a fun fact?
A fun fact. All right. So I was married in an Elvis wedding chapel in Las Vegas on Elvis's birthday.
It was your renewing of your vows, not your initial marriage.
Correct. Same woman.
Good. We love
not
Deirdre.
Unmarried, then remarried, just married and did it for fun. And she shares the same birthday as Elvis. So it was her birthday and Elvis's birthday, and we renewed our vows in Vegas, and it was quite comical.
That is pretty funny. And of all my siblings, I would probably think you were the least likely to do something like that.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you.
So, well, I know you've listened to several of my podcasts and given me some advice on it, which I definitely appreciate. So let's start with, what does courage mean to you?
So I actually had to look it up in the dictionary to see what courage
what
means.
What does the dictionary say?
So according to Merriam-Webster, courage is mental or moral strength to venture, persevere, and withstand danger, fear, or difficulty.
Wow.
Yeah. So that sounds like big and scary.
It does. So what does it mean to you?
So I it's funny. You asked me about doing this, and I was thinking about, all right, how do I answer this question? And I think it is being willing to push yourself, get out of your comfort zone a little bit, maybe, but also just being willing to do whatever you think is that thing. So, for example, I've always wanted to move out west towards the mountains, and Deirdre and I got close twice. It didn't happen, and life circumstances presented itself, and 1.5 years, actually 2 years ago about this time, and it worked out, and we were like, screw it, let's go. So, I don't think of courage as this big lofty thing, and I fought a bear or something crazy like that, or I jumped off a cliff. But I think it's more practical, right? It's like being, just being willing to do it. And listening to some of your episodes before, it's like people made career choices or other life choices. And, to me, I think it's kind of, if you keep it at a simple or more basic level of, is there something you wanted to do that was, kind of stretching you? And then were you willing to do it and put in the effort and follow through?
Yeah, absolutely. And, in all the episodes I've had, we've had people doing big courageous things and little courageous things and everything in between. And sometimes it was just step-by-step courage, just taking the next step. I talked to somebody the other day. She goes, I haven't done anything courageous. I'm like, yeah, you have. I mean, we all have. It's just, it's not always jumping off a building or, um, jumping out of an airplane kind of courage. It's those little things and doing the things that make you happy. Um, Colorado was a big move for our family just because we've always been local. I remember when you moved from Reston to Sterling.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about that actually. That was like
that was
uproar.
like, I think that was a bigger move. And by the way, people listening, Sterling from Reston is maybe 5 miles, 8,
Maybe 6.
maybe 6. And remember you moving there and it's like, oh, we got to get shots and a passport and pack our bags. And now ironically, everybody else is out of Reston. I'm the only one that's still there. So yeah, courage is all kinds of things, and definitely took courage to move your family out there and to start a new life. But I know that's always been on your radar. Just finally, it was the right time.
Yes, it was. By the way, I have jumped out of an airplane.
I know you have.
I don't want to do it again though. It wasn't that much fun.
Somebody asked me the other day, she's turning 50 and she wanted to do it. And she said something to me about doing that. I'm like, enjoy. That is not on my bucket list. Yeah, I remember when you did that and it was nobody knew until after the fact. So luckily you were okay.
Well, it's good.
Yes. So I know you've done other courageous things in your life. I know we talked about one a minute ago, which was big courage of lots of training and lots of commitments. You want to talk about Ironman?
Yep. So for the longest time, I saw the Ironman on TV, like when we were kids, I guess, when they first started doing it. It was like on ABC Wide World of Sports, like even before ESPN and all that stuff. So, I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And then, started doing triathlons and, our friends, the Conrads, got me into that. So, doing that, but I always had, doing Ironman on my list. And for those who are listening that don't know what Ironman is, it's a triathlon. So it's a triathlon. It's a swim, bike, and a run. But the Ironman distance, it is 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and then a full marathon, 26.2 miles. So it's 140.6 miles in one day.
Wow.
So anyways, it was on the list. I honestly, part of getting to the point of doing it was one of my neighbors. He did triathlons. We started training together. He wanted to do it. So it was one of those, he encouraged me or nudged me. I nudged him and we both said, screw it, let's do it. It's something that is doable for a lot of people. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of commitment, a lot of early mornings, a lot of, lunchtime workouts. So it's a lot to do, but you can do it if you put your mind to it. So I've done it twice. I thought I wanted to do 3 in my 40s, 2 in my 50s, and 1 in my 60s.
Yeah, what happened to that one? Is that still on the radar or is that?
No, so after 2, I decided I don't know. I lost it enough interest or my interest shift where I didn't want to commit that kind of time.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just a lot of work. Back to the whole, what does courage mean and all that. It's like, okay, that to me, that's not like jumping out of a plane, building, fighting a bear kind of courage. It's, I think, looking at the definition of Merriam-Webster, right? Can you persevere through something that's challenging or difficult? So, training's hard, right? And there's definitely days it was like, okay, I do not want to meet my training partner at the corner at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, go for a 6-hour bike ride, and then come home and coach my kids' lacrosse game. Yeah. But it was cool. I mean, it's super exciting. It's hard. The first time I did it, I was extremely nervous and paranoid about screwing up, about getting hurt. I mean, there's danger involved, right? You start to swim with 2,000 people that just start swimming at once. So that's kind of sketchy. But I was more nervous about like, okay, can I do it? Did I eat enough? Did I drink enough? And, all the hydration stuff. So fortunately, the first time was, it wasn't easy by any means, but it worked out probably as well as I could have hoped, right? I had a time goal, I felt pretty good throughout. I didn't feel awful afterwards. And when you finished, it's super cool. If anyone who's seen it on TV, there's the announcer, this MC, he probably doesn't do it anymore, but really famous statement of Leslie Kane, you are an Ironman, as you cross the finish line. So it's super cool.
Yeah.
So it's super exciting and fun and hard and all that. And I think the interesting part was the second time I did it. So my training partner got injured. So I ended up doing it by myself, which a lot of training by myself, which was super hard.
Yeah.
But when I was during the race, I was feeling good on the swim, felt really good on the bike, and I ran out of gas on the run about mile 11 or 12.
Oh, wow.
Which meant I had about 14 more to go. And I literally would walk a couple hundred yards and then maybe run 100 yards, and then walk a couple hundred yards and then maybe run. And I was not feeling good. I totally out of gas. Thought to myself, okay, what am I doing this stupid thing for? I'm going to quit.
And that takes courage to keep going.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of mental arguments over this
14 miles.
That's a long way to go, and it's like, okay, holy crap, how am I going to get this done? So it was hard for sure. Interestingly enough, what helped, I don't want to say it saved me, but definitely helped me, was on the race course, they serve all kinds of stuff, power bars, Cliff bars, all kinds of bars, drinks and stuff. One of the things that they serve is warm chicken broth. So the first time I did it, I'm thinking, why are they handing out chicken broth? I don't get it. Well, I found out the second time I did it because, after a while of sucking down goo and Gatorade and energy bars, your body doesn't want that junk anymore. So I tried some chicken broth once I could kind of choke it down. And really what it does, it's got sodium. So it really helped replenish. So it was pretty amazing. Anyways,
I never thought that.
I didn't either. So I got to the point where I could walk a little further, then run a little further, then run a little further. So long story short, the second time took almost an hour and a half longer than the first time, because the last 14 miles or so, I was really struggling, and it was tough. I mean, honestly, by the time I finished and crossed the finish line, I probably should have went into the medical tent and got an IV. And so it was pretty hard. But, while I was out there and I'd done all the training, I mean, the one thing I wanted to do was not finish. So it was definitely taxing physically, because I completely ran out of gas. But, anytime I think you get into particularly sort of an endurance event like that, it's more mental than it is physical at some point. So,
absolutely.
Anyways.
Yeah. So lots of things you said about that is courageous. Just even saying you're going to do it and putting out there, and then people are kind of watching and like asking, are you doing it? Are you not? And probably some people are expecting you to maybe back out. Like, okay, that's pretty big. And then I don't remember your second one as much as I do remember a lot about your first one. First, I remember you did the Marine Corps marathon, and we went and watched that. And just watching that, like, I am not a runner. And I watched that, I'm like, wow, maybe I could do that. I mean, just the excitement and the cheering people on and the adrenaline and the spirit of that was like, okay, maybe I could do that. Never did, and I have no desire. But then I remember you training for your first Ironman. I remember us being at the beach.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to take the kids to get donuts or something, and we pass you, and it's pouring down rain, and you're running and running and running. And I'm like, oh my gosh, on vacation, he's getting up at the crack of dawn and still running. And it was, I remember a lot of training and a lot of commitment, and, raising, you had kids that were pretty young at that point. That was a lot of commitment to have to do that, and the getting up early. And I think it takes the courage to get out of bed and just put your shoes on and get out the door and finish.
Well, you get to, I got to a point where my alarm would go off and I would stand up and start moving before I realized what was happening.
Yeah. I know somebody who talks about, getting up and getting motivated in the morning. She says, hashtag just go pee. Just get up and start the movement. And then you just go to the next step and the next step. But then I remember when you did the Ironman and we were tracking it and watching it on our phones where you were. And I remember it was nerve-wracking to watch and just scary to make worried that you were going to be okay. I know Mom was a mess when you finished. She was, I think, started crying because she was like so happy that you were okay,
Well,
because that is a lot. And you
yeah.
said the mental. I think the courage thing, it's the mental. It's jumping out of the plane. It's like getting the courage to jump. And how often you hear they just push you because you're already that far.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
No, I mean, it was definitely cool. Super hard. As I said, I had aspirations to do more, but I'm on to other things.
yeah, good for you.
Maybe a 207-mile bike ride is next on the radar.
Oh, wow. So I'm really surprised your super competitive brother didn't do it with you.
Yeah.
We
I'll
won't
let
get-
you ask. You'll let you ask him about that.
Okay, if I get him on here. So other things you can think of you've done courageous or in life seen courageous?
I mean, sure. I mean, I think there's lots of little things. Nothing that stands out. I mean, as I said earlier, to me, I think people get locked in this idea of, courage. What does that really mean? But I guess as I've been thinking about this and doing the podcast with you, just to me, it's a much more simple, basic thing of, are you willing, as I said earlier, to either, push yourself out of your comfort zone or just push yourself and then commit to achieving whatever you're pushing towards. So,
Yeah.
I think there's elements of my life that I think are very deliberate and maybe more conservative. And then there's elements where it's like, okay, yeah, I'll try an Ironman, or I'll try this, or I'll do that.
Right.
So
yeah, it's definitely, I think the little steps. And I think that's what I hope this podcast is giving people is encouragement. Like somebody listening might think, there's no way I can do an Ironman, but they might do a 5K. I was involved with a women's training program a couple of years ago, and they did an all women's 5K. And there was a woman that, so it was all women doing it, and I was kind of helping out. And so there were people all on the route cheering people on with signs. And there was a woman that, she walked the whole thing. I think she had super bad knees, could barely walk. And yet she did this 5K. And I remember her coming across the finish line last, and everybody cheered for her. Just the fact that she could walk that far. So it doesn't have to be big. It can be the little things. And I think what this podcast has done in the last year and the people I interviewed, it's given people permission to say me too, that in all different areas, whatever that thing might be, whether it's the thing that somebody talked about or just in general, to give someone courage to do those little teeny things that we need to do.
yeah, well, I mean,
Like,
people used to say to me, just as you kind of identified, like, oh, I can never do that around the Ironman stuff. Well, I didn't start running 26 miles out of the gate.
no,
You got to start.
gotta put
I
your
mean,
shoes on first.
yeah, I mean, there's an element of crawl, walk, run to it all. And, if you were actually to look at the training plan, it's this stair step approach where you train and then you push, and then you train and then you push a little further, and you train and push a little further, to where then when it comes time to do it, if you put in the work, I think my training program was 26 weeks long.
That's a long time.
And I was exercising and doing stuff before that, but it was really a disciplined and focused training program for that period of time. But when it came time to do the race, I did the work, and my brain and my body were ready enough.
Yeah. Major accomplishment. So the other thing I was just thinking of, a fun thing they did courageous, which I don't think I'd have the courage to do, is when did you jump out of a helicopter to go skiing?
Wait, no, I didn't jump. They landed.
Well, that's
No,
what I envisioned.
that's in the movies. No,
Okay.
I've done helicopter skiing, but they land it and you step out.
Oh, okay. Well, I envisioned, but you still skied a pretty, not a manicured perfect slope that's everybody else is on, right?
No, we were out in the wilderness, which was fun, super
Yeah.
fun. I'd like to do it again. Can I
Okay.
borrow some money?
Sure.
Maybe
Is it
from
expensive?
your Why Not Today merchandise sales. You can fund, You can fund Chris's helicopter skiing trip.
Okay. And I'll watch. I'm not going to join you on that one either.
I'll get video.
Okay. I'll do other things. So, this is the anniversary episode of the podcast, and it's ironically 10 years since Dad passed away, which is really hard to believe. It's been that long. And so he was a pretty out loud, courageous, nothing's impossible kind of guy. I don't think, he was always problem solving what we could do. So anything you can think of, share courage. I know I actually pulled out, I mentioned this, but I forgot to grab it, is the eulogy that you guys wrote about, he had a plan A, B, and C, and sometime it had to go to D or E. So lessons learned from Dad.
Yeah. And so I think interesting, and this gets into kind of probably some deeper family kind of dynamics, but being the fourth and being sort of, not forgotten, but just, as you get down to like, okay, he's still here. Good. Okay, good. He's still
Somebody
around,
else
but...
was talking about that the other night, that they're number 3, and it was actually Grace's husband, Braden. He was the third child, and it was hard to find pictures of him. I'm like, yeah, Chris can relate to that one.
Yeah, I've had mom say, "Oh, here's a picture of you," and she showed that to Deirdre, and Deirdre's like, "No, that's Brian." Anyways,
And Grace and I, who were the first, we counted how many pictures were at Grandma's house between the two of us.
Yeah. Those of us who are thirds and fours have a different perspective than those who are ones.
Yes, which is interesting that we all have different perspectives growing up in the same house.
Yeah. So, I think with Dad, your comment about him always kind of, being willing to do stuff and try stuff. I mean, I think one of the things that I appreciated about some of his perspectives, but also I found frustrating at times, was he had this perpetual element of buck the system, at least from my perspective.
Rules were for other people.
Yeah, which, I mean, I can appreciate parts of that. But for me personally, a lot of things that I've done in my life have been much more deliberate, and I don't have an issue conforming at certain points. But kind of thinking back, and I don't know if this is courage, but certainly feel like he encouraged all of us to explore, but also enjoy what we were doing and make decisions around that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because, I mean, it could be over in an instant. Think about him, right? I mean, he had that accident when he was in high school. I think about me and my jet ski accident. I could not be here right now.
Yeah.
So there's an element of it could all be over, and not sell everything and run to the hills and live like today's your last day. But, I think one of the things that I took from him was sort of that enjoyment piece. And, he used to always say, especially towards the end, like, "Oh, I woke up on the right side of the grass." Right. And then I think about actually the day he died, we were at our ski house in West Virginia, and Brian was like, "We got to go home." And it's dumping snow. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, "No, we're not going anywhere." So we wake up the next day, and there's a foot of fresh snow on the ground. And Brian and I look at each other and say, "Well, Dad would have wanted us to ski before we went home."
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I take
Didn't you hike to the top of that mountain that night, though?
Yeah, we did it that night. Yeah. And then we skied the next day.
Okay. Of course he would have.
So, but I mean, that to me, that's sort of one of the primary things that I kind of think back on and take from him was, again, not this, life's a party and perpetual enjoyment, but doing things, I guess you could probably couch it in that, do you work to live or live to work?
Yeah.
Right. And, I kind of joke, with friends, and like, "Oh, you got to work." I'm like, "Yeah, but the work pays for the fun I'm doing."
Exactly.
So I don't know. That's the kind of stuff I would take, or I think about. And, again, when you ask me to do this, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I know all of us have different perspectives on that. I mean, just looking at you, right? You quit your corporate job and went and started selling makeup full time. It's like, oh, holy crap. Okay.
Yeah.
Good for you.
23 years ago. Just crazy.
Which is crazy. But that, that's just another, just another way to sort of adapt maybe that outlook, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say that kind of stuff. I mean, I think, his stuff of, being Mr. Community was great. But also I just kind of looked at him. He was just our dad,
Yeah, exactly.
and all those things that he taught us, big and little. And so I don't know, but yeah, I would say that kind of stuff of just
Living.
enjoying the ride.
Yeah, and so people listening may not know this story, but and so the logo is an eye patch and a handlebar mustache because the night he graduated from high school, he got in a major car accident and was thrown, I think it was 300 feet out of the windshield, and they didn't think he was going to live. And so he always had an eye patch. And then he was in another serious accident before him and mom got married, and he was scalped. And I remember mom has a scar on her cheek. And I remember you said at one point, I thought all moms have that.
I thought it was makeup.
Yeah. But I remember being in high school and I wrecked his precious car, and I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to kill me. Like, I was scared to tell him he was out of town, and he came home with flowers. Or he first told mom, said, just tell Leslie I'm glad she's alive, and that's what matters. And he brought me flowers, which was a good lesson that I've never forgotten. It's like, okay, a car is a thing, but a life is so much more important. You can replace a car. But then the thing we were talking about last night, which we were with Brian and Kelly. Kelly's our sister-in-law. And we were talking about our cross-country trip we took, which looking back was pretty amazing that they did that. And Kelly couldn't believe we possibly did that. We're not going to tell all the stories on that one. But when I was 16 and you were 12?
11. Yeah, 11 and a half.
11. So our parents bought a 25-foot camper. And I don't know where they came up with this idea, but to drive cross country. And not even our youngest sister, because Amanda wasn't even born, but Catherine was 5 weeks old when we left. And we drove cross country and we were gone for 5 weeks. And as a 16-year-old with a brand new driver's license, the last thing I really wanted to do was be with my family. But it was a pretty cool experience in the fact that dad worked and we were able to travel and see all these things and do all these things. I do have a memory of when we were at the Redwoods and they were like, look at this beautiful thing. And we're like teenagers, like, we want to go back to sleep.
I was excited about it.
Oh, you were? Okay, I wasn't. See, totally different viewpoint. But that was definitely an adventure.
I think the courage part there for dad was he let Brian and I learn how to drive a 25-foot motorhome on that trip.
People can't believe that story. And you were 11 and Brian was 12?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a little crazy. It was on straight highways and they switched drivers, but I drove probably a third of the trip and I was 16 years old, which I think mom drove for 15 minutes.
Wow.
That was enough for her. That was kind of crazy. But all right, so we could chat all day, but we don't want to bore people with all our family history. So how or what would you say to encourage somebody to be courageous?
To be what? Be great?
Courageous.
Oh, courageous. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think just, if there's something you want to do, identify, how do you get from point A to point B and commit yourself to do it. I mean, I think back to our previous comments of, I think people put barriers up like, oh, that's just too big or too hard. Right. And they don't do it. Yeah. Versus it's just the thing, whatever the thing is. And this is how you achieve stated goal of thing, and just put your mind to it, which again, back to the Ironman example, right? I didn't start running 26 miles or riding my bike 100 miles. It took me a while to get there.
Right. You had to break it down.
Yeah, I would say, just if there's something that you want to do, just be willing to do it, but kind of break it down at a practical level. Like, right. and don't immediately dismiss it because it seems hard or too lofty.
Yeah, totally agree. Just take that one step.
Yeah, that one step. Your friend's example, you just got to get out of bed first. Okay, well, there you go.
Yep, exactly. Well, this has been fun, and I thank you for joining me, and it's been extra special to have this as an anniversary episode. I did pull up the analytics the other day, and when I looked earlier in the week, it was 1,575 people had downloaded the episodes, and it was in 26 different countries people had listened to, which was kind of cool. Like, who would ever?
All right, this one's going to tip the scales. I can feel it.
Okay, all right, it will. So Well, thanks for joining me. And if you want to follow the Why Not Today podcast, we're on Apple, iTunes, Google. There's a website now, which is just Why Not Today podcast. We do have some merchandise, which I guess the sales are going to work to fund Christopher going helicopter skiing. I've got cups
Very much.
and t-shirts and vinyls, and I even have a jacket now, which is kind of fun. So, well, thank you again. And if you want to rate the podcast, review it, I would really appreciate it. And thanks, Chris, for joining us.
Thanks
Been
for
fun.
having me.
All right. Bye.